The Supreme Court issued a couple of rulings today, a couple of decisions. The one that I think is the most egregious is the ruling that upheld 2 Arizona voting restrictions that a lower court had already ruled discriminated against minority voters, even though a lower court said, no, this is unconstitutional. You can't do this. The Supreme Court overturned that and said, yes, it is constitutional. It's a ruling that suggests that it's going to be a lot harder to challenge these new laws that are being passed, even as we speak, by Christian, white, male legislatures around the country, because they are supporting the Orange Vomit's claim that the 2020 election was stolen. Now, the ruling by the Supreme Court obviously was 6-3, which is what the Orange Vomit had in mind, not just for this ruling, but anything that concerned him, that it would be 6-3 in his favor. But Sammy the Fish Alito, he wrote the opinion in the 6-3 ruling. The court's liberals, by the way, according to the Washington Post, joined an opinion written by Justice Elena Kagan, who protested that the decision weakens, actually, I would say it destroys, the shield provided by the Voting Rights Act that was first passed in Lyndon Johnson's administration in 1965. That was a law that forbade other laws that result in discrimination based on race. And that law, the Voting Rights Act, was passed because people of color, back in the day when we were talking about African Americans almost exclusively, were being systematically denied the right to vote, even though they were full citizens of the United States as much as any white person. But because they were not white, then they didn't have a right to vote, according to millions of white people. So the Voting Rights Act was passed. Now, as a result of what happened today by the Supreme Court, supporters and those who disagreed with the decision said it's probably going to strengthen the hand of these state legislatures run by white Christian males that say tighter voting laws are necessary because of all the election fraud that's out there and the cheating and the lying, which is all bullshit, as we know. And it's apparent now that the ruling by the Supreme Court is going to make it more difficult to eliminate the laws that are being passed by these white Christian male legislatures that fall heavily on minority voters. White people just goddamn can't stop, can they? It's like they're heroin addicts or something, to just keep beating the shit out of their black brothers and sisters in this country any way they can. They just can't stop. And now there's this. These bills being introduced and passed out of state legislatures and signed into law by white male Christian governors to kick black people in the ass again and again and again. Wow. Wow. Biden said in a statement today, quote, "I am deeply disappointed in today's decision by the Supreme Court that undercuts the Voting Rights Act and upholds what Justice Kagan called, quote, a significant race-based disparity in voting opportunities," end quote. Biden added, quote, in a span of just 8 years, the court has now done severe damage to two of the most important provisions of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, a law that took years of struggle and strife to secure, end quote. And of course, the Christian fascists, they just stood up on their hind legs and crowed and cheered and said that the decision by the Supreme Court today was a victory for states and the state's ability to control and protect voting practices. Mark Brnovich, the Attorney General of Arizona, said, quote, "Today is a win for election integrity safeguards in Arizona and across the country. Fair election," and he said this with a straight face, without gagging on his own bile. "Fair elections are the cornerstone of our republic, and they start with rational laws that protect both the right to vote and the accuracy of the results." You miserable son of a bitch. Oh my God. How can people say things like that about issues like this? I wish I had an answer. If my grandmother, long dead, could get her hands on somebody like this Attorney General in Arizona, she would, first of all, she'd reach up, because she was a very small Italian woman, she would reach up, grab him by his ear, drag him out to the mulberry bush behind her house, and instruct him to cut a switch. Having done that, she would take the switch away from him, march him back into the house, onto the back porch, and then switch the hell out of him until he promised not to talk out again in church, and he would do his best to not say stupid shit like, "Today is a win for election integrity safeguards." My. Now, election law experts say the decision by the Trump court is part of a pattern in which the Supreme Court has systematically weakened legal protections for minority voters. Of course, the terrified white people in the United States are truly losing their shit when they're doing this. I mean, white people, and I can't say we white people, I'm just not going to associate with them. I'm not. There was a time when my tribe was considered only partially white to begin with, so I'm going to fall back on that. But white people have been terrified that they're going to lose the privilege of being white, rather than just recognizing that, as Bob Dylan said, the times they are a-changing, and work with it. Nah, they're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. So white people are acting crazier and crazier. First, in order to stop scary black people, they passed laws that said a gram of cocaine rock was much worse than a gram of cocaine powder. Once they discovered that black folk, for some reason, would buy the cocaine rock, and white people would buy the cocaine powder. So what do you do? Well, you make the cocaine rock punishable, possession of or use of, punishable 10 times greater or 20 or 100 times greater than honking up a line of cocaine powder. And what's the quick result of that? Well, you have a lot of black people going to prison. Yeah. So with so-called drug laws, with all sorts of discrimination against black people, whites thought they had finally succeeded, but no, not quite. Because the demographers started saying to white people, hey, listen, here's a newsflash for you. You'll probably continue to be the major race in the United States for the foreseeable future. But you're going to be a minority majority. What's that mean? Well, it means very simply that if you take all the not white people and lump them all together, Asians, Latinos, African Americans, lump all those people together, they're going to equal more than you people with the European heritage. Well, that just freaked the hell out of white people. So after putting 1.5 million black men in prison, they decided, all right, we're going to have to make sure that the only people get elected are people that we approve of, that will protect us white folk. So that's where we are now. Richard Hasten, an election law expert at University of California, Irvine, said, quote, "The conservative Supreme Court has taken away all the major available tools for going after voter restrictions. This at a time when some Republican states are passing new restrictive voting laws. So the court," he went on, "makes it harder to prove intentional racial discrimination in passing a voting rule," end quote. Which will have some effect on the Biden Justice Department's newly filed complaint about what they did here in Georgia, where it concerns our voting laws, the mechanics of our voting laws. Especially the part that really gets me is because it's so anti-Jesus. I mean, it really is. I'm talking about the Jesus that my grandmother taught me about. And that's the part of the voting rights law that said, I'm expanding on what it said, but it has said in a broader sense that if you pass by your neighbor who is hot and tired and hungry and thirsty, because he or she has been standing online to try to vote for hours in the Georgia sun. And the reason he or she's been standing online for hours trying to vote in the Georgia sun is because the number of voting machines or poll workers within this precinct has been greatly reduced. And your neighbor who's standing online in the hot Georgia sun for hours and hours waiting to vote can't go to a different precinct to vote, even though he or she is still a resident of the state of Georgia, and all the voting precincts that we're talking about are in the state of Georgia, no matter. But if you try to give that neighbor of yours who's standing online in the hot Georgia sun for hours and hours trying to vote, if you give that neighbor of yours a drink of water or a cheese sandwich or a donut, you are going to be charged with a very serious crime. And you will be arrested. See what I mean about being anti-Jesus? But these laws have been passed by white male Christians and signed into law by a white male Christian.
Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcast. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.